some of the biggest clutter is in our own heads, stopping us from having clear thoughts and ideas. So here is how to close down the browser tabs in your brain. Let's go. Hey, how's it going? It's Laura and I help you live a simpler, happier life. And it's so much easier to do that when you're not overthinking everything, when you're not agonizing over every decision and trying to keep track of 11 bajillion things that are going on up here. If your brain isn't calm, you're not calm. You know, if your brain is racing, you're going to feel frazzled. You're going to feel like you're falling behind or like you're being pulled in a million different directions. You're going to feel drained, like you're constantly chasing your tail. So let's talk about closing down those brain tabs so that you can organize and prioritize your thoughts and think clearly. So when I'm at my most frazzled, the first thing I will do is I will write everything down, just dump everything out of my head and onto paper. Doesn't matter if I already have a to-do list, doesn't matter if I already have things on my calendar, doesn't matter if I've already captured some of the stuff elsewhere. I will still start from scratch, blank sheet of paper, and just get it all out of my head. Everything that comes to mind in that moment. And I want to share an example of how random that could be. Like this is an actual example from previous brain dumps that I've done, just to give you an idea of kind of the mix of things and how nothing is like edited or anything. So I wrote down what the first one is: everything happens as it should and when it should. That's just something that was playing on my mind. The next thing is clean fingernails. Obviously, I think I had been out planting my veg bed. Actually, yes, because the very next thing on it is that I'm proud of myself for planting the veg bed and the grow bags. So clean fingernails was like top of mind for me. I have a quote that I wanted to remember. So that's how random it can be. I have this other one always makes me laugh. Sometimes I just kind of like write down affirmation type things, either because I'm feeling great or I'm actually not feeling great and I'm trying to like boost myself. But this one always makes me laugh because it's so random. So it starts off: I will be calm and mindful today. I will take my time and ration my energy. Next one: I am making my home a better place to live little by little, day by day. I am compassionate and caring. I feel youthful and carefree. Buy soil. This was the previous entry to the when I had planted my veg bed. But it's just an example of how random and ridiculous, but also helpful this can be. Does not have to be pretty, does not have to be in any particular format, doesn't even really have to make sense, honestly, as long as you can read it, as long as it's legible. So as you've seen, I have some things in there that are kind of like more practical, actionable things, and then just random thoughts that were in my head. You know, and I'm not trying to organize or categorize anything. I'm not trying to color code anything. I'm not writing down kind of like ideas on one page and tasks on another and kind of like ideas on a page, memories on a different page. Nah, they all just go into one big long list, like stream of consciousness kind of thing. Whatever pops into my head just gets written down. All I'm trying to do is get everything out of my head so that I can grapple with it. Now, and when I say everything, I don't mean every single thought or idea I have ever had. You don't need to be a perfectionist about this, and I say this as a perfectionist, but these are just the things that are on your mind in that moment. If something else crops up for you, you can always come back and add it to the list brain dump situation. But when things are chaotic up here, I call those thought tornadoes. You know, everything is just spinning and churning wildly. Everything is like moving very quickly up here and it feels like you can't get a handle on it. Thoughts are kind of like the wind, you know, they're just flying around up there. It's really hard to get a handle on them. It's really hard to grasp them, and very quickly things can move or change. So writing them down is really about trying to take control of them. It's about putting them all in one place so that you can see them all in one go. It's about containing them. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I am always amazed at how little is actually going on up here. You know, if I'm just thinking things, when I'm like frazzled or overwhelmed, it feels like I have an insurmountable amount of problems. You know, it feels like I have endless thoughts, endless ideas, endless tasks that I need to do, just endless things that I need to keep track of. But when I write them down, I realize it's actually not all that much. It's manageable. You know, up here it's a tornado. Down here it's a few puffs of air. So basically I can see it for what it actually is, and it's never as bad as I had imagined it was. That alone, like if you did nothing else, that exercise alone helps me breathe a sigh of relief, because everything that I thought was insurmountable, everything that I thought was unmanageable or just like an infinite amount of things is now all contained within a page or two. It's definitive. You know I can tackle it. Up here seems endless. Down here, it very much has an end. It's kind of like when you take on a new project and in the beginning it feels very big, it feels very overwhelming. You wonder, is the dog sighing? Yes. Lying down there must feel very overwhelming too. But yeah, it can feel so overwhelming and it can feel like the job will never get done. But when you focus on the few steps that you can actually take, when you break it down into the smaller chunks, into the things that you actually need to do, then it feels much more manageable. But here's the thing. You will probably, like me, have a big mishmash of different things. Some of them are going to be just random thoughts that don't really mean anything. Some are going to be ideas for things that you might like to do someday, but they're not all of that urgent. Others will be different tasks that you want to do with varying degrees of urgency. So how do we take all of that stuff, all that different stuff, and actually put some structure on it? You put on your teacher hat or your editor hat. You grab a red pen, literally or metaphorically speaking, and you start cutting. Okay, you start crossing things out. Some of what you've written down will just be random thoughts. Don't really require any action, just something that was playing on your mind. So many of mine are things like that. Could be a song that was stuck in your head or that you haven't heard in a while, you want to listen to again or whatever. It could be a quote that you heard somewhere recently. Or maybe it's just something that you wrote down and after it was written down you realize that you don't really want or need to do anything with that thought. You know, sometimes I write down things and I wonder why I was ever giving them headspace to begin with. I have one here that is to check the status of meditation cushion. I had ordered a cushion to meditate on and I just couldn't remember when it was due to arrive. I didn't really need to check the status of it. I had only just ordered it. I could have just waited until it showed up. But yeah, there are so many things like that where you still need to get them down because obviously your brain thinks that this is important. You know, your brain can't really prioritize things. It's just storing them all up there. And it's like, do we need to think about this? Like, is this something that we need to be worrying about? When you write it all down, it's kind of like telling your brain, okay, I've got this. It's taken care of. There could be a lot of junk floating around in that thought tornado. But when you write them down, it's kind of like separating everything out so that you can see it for what it is. It's not all just jumbled together in a big mess up here. No, it actually has some structure. If something feels irrelevant, once you write it down, red pen, cross it off. Now, for what's left, it's decision time. This can be one of the most liberating aspects of this exercise, and once you get into the habit of this, you are going to be able to stop those thought tornadoes in their tracks. Because just like with physical clutter, a lot of mental clutter is just unmade decisions. We're not sure what to do about something, so we think, oh, I'll just store that away for later reference or to think about it later. When we finally make the decision, we close that tab. Our brain can stop running that question on an endless loop because the decision has been made. So how do we make those decisions and close down those tabs once and for all? Every decision starts with a question. Do I do A or B? And sometimes the answer will be reasonably obvious. You know, your options will be limited. It's pretty straightforward. You know what the options are, you know how many of them there are, and you can just choose from that limited selection. So, should I cook tonight or should I order food? Should I wash my hair today or tomorrow? Always tomorrow for me. Should I finish this book that I'm reading or should I start a new one? Should I do this task now or later, etc. You want to tackle all those types of things first. If it feels like a pretty easy decision to you, make it. Now, you don't necessarily have to take action on that thing in the moment, just make the decision. So for example, if you were going back and forth on where to go on holiday this year, make the decision, decide where you're going. You don't necessarily have to sit down and like book it all right now, but decide where you're going. Close out that tab. Now, something to keep in mind while you're doing this is really important. Keep it in mind during the exercise, but also kind of from here on out. Ask yourself, does this decision even really matter? I made a video a few years ago where I was talking about, I was out shopping for a storage container and I had found two and I was trying to decide between them. They were both similar but had slight differences. So I was standing in the shop for ages, holding the two of them, trying to decide which would be the best one, and finally I realized the decision didn't matter. Both of them would do pretty much the exact same job. I was wasting so much time and mental energy on something so trivial. More often than not, it's not that deep. Now, I will talk about harder decisions a little bit later on in the video, but really most decisions are not going to be life or death. They're not going to be like, this door leads to the castle at the center of the labyrinth and this door leads to certain death. If you get that reference, we can be friends. But I freed up so much mental bandwidth when I realized that the vast majority of decisions aren't really that deep. They don't really mean all that much. Not that much is going to rely on them. It doesn't really matter which storage container I buy if they're both going to do the same job. I think we get so caught up in thinking that there is a right answer that we end up plaguing ourselves with doubt. We end up feeding the thought tornado because once you have one unmade decision and you start overthinking it and thinking that there must be a right and wrong answer, you start to question all of these things and it just adds to your tornado. Really, it's not about a right or wrong path. They're just paths. They will both have their pros and cons. You know, we think that they will diverge in completely opposite directions, but really they will just wind back and forth. Sometimes they will even cross over each other. Sometimes we're on one, we can veer a little bit off track, but we can course correct. Sometimes we go down one path and we end up on the other one anyway, or on a completely different path that we hadn't even perceived at the time, we hadn't foresaw. So get the idea of a right and wrong way out of your head and just make a decision. Close out that tab. And now that you've built up some decision-making muscle, it's time to tackle the slightly more difficult decisions. Sometimes you're faced with a genuinely big decision and the stakes are higher. So a few years ago when my dad was ill, he was faced with a big decision about his treatment. So he needed a liver transplant, which we had known for a while. He had an autoimmune disease that had gone undetected for so long that it had done permanent damage to his liver. But then they also found a tumor on his liver, so he had cancer. So basically at that time, two things were killing him, trying to kill him. So the first option was to treat the cancer, to try and stop or slow its growth long enough so that he could get the transplant. But that came with the sizable risk that it could damage his liver even further, to the point where he could go into liver failure and die. And that is obviously, as well as all of the kind of general risks and downsides that are related to any big medical treatment, any cancer treatment. You know, it may have made him so sick, so weak, that he wouldn't have been well and strong enough to get the transplant. The second option then was basically the wait and see approach. It was waiting and hoping that he would get a transplant in time before the cancer grew or spread, because having the transplant, because they would be removing his liver, they would also be removing the tumor. So it would kind of solve both problems, but not if the cancer had spread. So that was essentially a life or death decision, but we did not know which option would lead to which outcome. We just couldn't tell. Like, nobody could tell us. Obviously, like, nobody has a crystal ball. You can't predict exactly what is going to happen. There are no guarantees in those situations. So my dad made the best decision that he could at the time with the information that he had, and that's all any of us can do. My dad chose to treat the cancer. He chose to be proactive. And the reality is that it could have killed him. Thankfully, it did not. But what happened in the end was, just before he was due to start his cancer treatment, they found a donor for him. His transplant went ahead and he came out the other side. It's like I was saying earlier, you know, he chose path A and ended up on path B anyway. And it all worked out. I mean, it might not have, but that's the whole point. Like, none of us can say which path will lead where. None of us can say that if I make this decision, it is definitely going to lead to this outcome. You just never know. All you can do, again, is make the best decision that you can, and make a decision that feels right, and then just move on. Even decisions that feel really big in the moment and are really big in the moment, like which medical treatment to pursue, or like, you know, whether you should switch careers or start a family or move to the other side of the world. Even in those situations, there are no right or wrong answers. Obviously, those decisions don't have to be taken lightly. Do consider them, give them some thought, but at the end of the day, you make your decision with the understanding and the acceptance that you don't have a crystal ball and you can't guarantee any outcomes, and you just don't know. You can try your best, but you just don't know, and you have to be okay with that, and it is okay. You make the decision that feels right in the moment, and you kind of let go of the rest. You leave the rest to the universe. You just put one foot in front of the other. So you've made as many decisions as you can. You've closed down as many brain tabs as you can. If you have decided that you are going to do something, you know, something is actionable, and you've decided that you do, it survived the red pen treatment, write it on your to-do list, or schedule the appointment, or have the conversation, or put that thing in a memory box, or whatever needs to happen. Do what you need to do to officially close out that tab. Do what you need to do so that your brain doesn't have to keep track of it. But let's face it, you're still going to be left with some things that you just don't know what to do about. Sometimes you won't even know what your options are. You know, maybe you are facing into something that you've never faced before, and you just have no idea like what the process is, what comes next. Maybe it is something where there are so many options that it feels entirely overwhelming, that you just become paralyzed by the sheer volume of information and options, and you stall. You don't know what to do. So essentially, a project either feels so new and foreign to you, or so big and overwhelming to you, that you don't know how to proceed. In those cases, you break it down to the simplest decision that you can make to move this thing forward, to get the ball rolling and build up some form of momentum. So if you don't know what to do, maybe your decision is to research it. You know, spend some time researching it. Maybe you put something on your calendar to spend X amount of time researching, or to speak to somebody who has faced a similar situation or who has some expertise in that area. Just figure out what is the teeny tiniest next step that you could take to move forward. What is the decision that you can make right now? Now, let's be honest here, okay? Let's keep it very real. Not everything is going to be able to be neatly squared away. You're not going to get to a stage where you have no thoughts, where all your tasks are taken care of. Your brain will never be a completely blank slate, and that's okay. That's not what we're going for. It's the same in our homes. You know, we're not decluttering until we have absolutely nothing left. All we want to do is close down the unimportant tabs, all of that mental clutter, so that we can more clearly see the things that are important to us. It's so we have quicker access to the things that we need when we need them. It's so that we can process things more efficiently. It's so that instead of having this huge thought tornado, what we actually have is just a cool, gentle breeze blowing clarity and creativity through our brains. And once you get into the habit of making decisions, you're going to be able to stop those thought tornadoes before they even form. You will stop any mental clutter from accumulating. Same with physical stuff in your home. If you make a decision on what to do with something instead of just putting it down somewhere and, you know, figuring you'll decide later, you're going to stop piles of stuff from forming everywhere. Make the decision, deal with the clutter. If there is some aspect of mental clutter that you feel I haven't covered, please let me know. I might answer your question in a future video. And if you are an overthinker and you agonize over every decision and you would like some more clarity and confidence in your decision-making ability, go ahead and check out this video. It's from a few years ago. It's the one I referenced about like making decisions between the two storage containers. It will help you go from overthinking to decisive action. And until then, gur have míle maith agam, agus feici mé sibh go luath. Slán!